good afternoon everyone. Welcome, or as we say in Australia, g'day. G'day mate. Mate, I'm Greg Craven from Tecnologías. We're a very new GeneXus distributor looking after Australia and New Zealand. A photo of my home, that's where we live, and that's not far from where our offices are either, so it's a pretty cool place to live. So we've actually just been starting, doing the power of doing just recently. And today I'm going to present to you some of the benefits that we've sort of found of using integration technologies along with GeneXus. So I'm going to present on a case study or a client that we started getting involved with. We've actually been involved with them for a long time, one of our long-term clients, and we've built a solution using the integration technology and GeneXus. So prior to starting with this project, this is a large engineering firm. They are basically out there building food manufacturing companies. So they'll build large industrial buildings that manufacture food all throughout Asia Pacific. They have obviously a lot of engineers. So a lot of smart guys, 150 odd engineers roaming around, project managers on top of that. They'll also then subcontract out the work to the people that will actually do a lot of the building processes. But they'll still actually manage the entire process. And you think for a company such as this that they'd have all these things working together. Well, reality is obviously very different to our sort of perceptions. So they had systems like, they just implemented Salesforce a few years ago. And that was used for their finance team, believe it or not, as well as the salespeople. The salespeople used it to actually sell, create opportunities, try and follow up on clients and things like that. The finance team used it for resource management, trying to forecast what sort of resources they'd need, the sort of costs behind those resources and things like that. They had a very complex project contract management system sitting on its own. It actually had the ability to actually send out emails to people to automatically update forms, workplace forms, on-site forms, things. So they thought that was pretty cool, pretty good software. But again, sitting on their own. Timesheets and all these other systems sitting beside each other, but not actually talking to each other. So imagine, looking at this organisation thinking, well, it's not necessarily that big. They're spending quite a lot of money on technology, but nothing's talking to each other. So the actual, and they actually also had a good old legacy AS400 system, which actually managed their finance. So they had some manual processes around this as well. And this is where we sort of started with. And our approach was actually really simple. We said to them, look, we can get some of these technologies integrated. We were actually, at that time, doing a small piece of integration for them. But we could actually use GeneXus to build out a common or one system that could manage their companies and contacts. Because they could not see inside any of their systems what one or a company was doing. So if you're a subcontractor or a client or a supplier, they couldn't actually go and say, well, what are we actually doing with this company? Or what are we doing with this person? They couldn't have one vision of that particular company or that particular contract. So we sat back and spent a week doing an initial prototype. We created an AWS account. I don't know if any of you guys have created an AWS account. It takes a couple of hours. You put your credit card in, but it's free for the first year. You run up an elastic beanstalk, an SQL database, and away you go. We found that you could do a few security settings, and suddenly we had access to a SQL database that we could connect to. So straight away, we used GeneXus to build a simple application which created the database for us, but then that database had nothing in it. So normally you'd go along and say, okay, we've built this little system to show you. It works on your mobile phone, it works on the web, and you put some dummy data in it. Company A, Company B, Company C, Fred, Joe, Ronaldo, Peter. But what we did was actually then use some of the integration technology to actually populate it with all their data. So we actually grabbed all their data from Salesforce.com. We grabbed their data from their AS400, from DB2, and we started pushing it all into this one database. So the very, very first time that we actually went to show them what we sort of built, they actually went, wait a minute, that's our data. Our data's on your mobile phone. I said, well, we can put it on your phone, because we could easily deploy an Android app as well. So they actually weren't looking at an actual demo software. They weren't looking at a piece of software they grabbed off the street and downloaded and played with. They were looking at their own application, their own data. So they could see, oh, wait a minute, I can see this contact. Oh, you mean I can call them? Oh, I can see where they are in Google Maps. I can get directions to go to their office. I can send them an email, all within this simple app, and these are all my clients already. So that power, they just went straight away and went, wow, that's awesome. We love this. What else can you do with it? You know, obviously we can do the simple things, you know, contacts and companies. That seems really easy, and it was really easy. Although at the same time we were learning GeneXus as well, so that made it, you know, a bit of a longer process. This could have been done now. If I revisited this project, I could do that in a couple of hours. So we implemented this interim solution. So we had an integration platform sitting in between, and it was synchronizing data in the background. It was actually sending information to and from Salesforce.com. It's actually pretty easy. Salesforce have a web service API. And you go, well, Greg, you could have done that inside GeneXus. And I said, yep, I know that now, but I learn these things as we go along. But with Data Connect, I could actually pull out 14,000 records, 20,000, 100,000, a few million records, and publish that directly into any database or system that we needed. So going through this process, we understood how to connect on to the other systems as well. So we connected on to the new Forma system. We dragged out some information from the AS400. We weren't able to actually populate the data inside the AS400. It had a very old legacy system with too much business rules behind it. So we actually created a manual process here, which is going to enable their office in Malaysia to do any manual updates. So they could actually go through and basically see a change occur immediately. So here they are on their mobile phone, it's an Android one though, and straight away they make a change in Salesforce, and at the time when we're demoing, we change the scheduling of the integration to happen every 5 seconds. Could be every minute, could be real time, but we just chose to do it then. But they could literally go and say, wow, that just changed there. And they thought that was really cool, because it was their data, it was their information. They actually thought that, wow, how did we get so far so quickly? And that was the scary thing that they were sort of looking at. Because even though we only did 2 objects, or 2 transactions, the reality is we did a couple extra in that time. But we didn't show them that. We don't want to give away too much too early. We don't want to actually show them everything at once, because there obviously would be some concerns on, wait a minute, if you can do all that, we want all this, and we want all of this tomorrow. And the reality is, we actually ended up with a big problem. They said to us, okay, we love that. Can you do this? Can you do this? You know, we've got a bunch of engineers that are actually going to a site, and that site has no internet. So they have to, after doing some of their work, get back to their hotel, which could be a 2-3 hour drive, and spend all that time at night doing all their forms, their updates to the projects, everything they needed to do. So the answer was yes. Can we do a project to do this? The answer was yes. And we kept on saying yes all the time. And this is what created the problem for us. Because whilst, yes, we could do everything, and everything they asked was possible, the reality is that they didn't have the time or necessary funds to sort of deliver everything that we would like to deliver. So our project sort of evolved into an extended solution where we actually grabbed all the projects and we just turned those on. In other words, we went inside GAM, if those of you who have been working with GeneXus for a while, and we actually allowed them to see the projects and contract opportunities. So within a week, we set another meeting up and we showed them those pieces. And they've gone, oh, that's fantastic. All our projects are there. All our contracts and contract opportunities are there. All that information's there. They could start playing around with it straight away. So they weren't looking at the demo data all the time. They came with us another problem. They said we need to have resource scheduling and all the forecasting. So we need every timesheet of every single person in the system to come in through every day. They get updated on a regular basis. And they wanted to ensure that we actually could see the timesheets and their reports that they wanted and things like that. So the first sort of prototype started evolving and evolving. And then they asked another question. Why we got Salesforce? That's costing us $100 grand a year in licensing. Why are we doing this for? So that the actual next project that's sort of kicking off, that has kicked off, is actually how do we get rid of this? Because it's a real pain. They're not using any mobile applications in Salesforce. They're using the basics of a contact, company, opportunity, basic project information. They do have a fairly complex resource planning system in there, but that could be done in GeneXus. You know, there's no limitations there for us in it. So the simple evolution of how we sort of got started then started evolving into, you know, what's next. And the big picture here of what's next is basically it's only the GeneXus side. And sure, we still have some integration piece in the middle. We've got two other applications that, you know, their heads may be on the chopping block in the next year or two. But essentially, it's getting them focused on, actually, you know what? We're going to leave these other systems alone. We want to be able to start looking at how we can supply applications to our subcontractors. You know, we get a new project that starts up, and there's all this paperwork and forms and approvals and government, council. All that requires to be managed. So how can we sort of go ahead and implement some solutions around that place so that the application extends beyond the internal company itself and starts involving all the partners, all their suppliers. They don't want to be able to, you know, update systems. They want the companies and suppliers and subcontractors to do their work for them. Because initially, all that information would come in, and they had a centre over in Malaysia that would do a lot of the manual processing and updating. But now we can push that back onto those suppliers and push it back onto those subcontractors. So then you end up with a greater connected network. And not just a connected network with your suppliers and contractors, but also their customers. The customers will be able to go onto their own app and look at where their projects are at, the stages that they're at, look at what approvals and things that sort of need to be defined. Now, throughout all this process, it wasn't as easy as we put on the screen and make things happen. We actually had to set up some rules. So we had to sit down with them and say, look, moving into an environment where you've got multiple applications, sure, we can connect them all together and make it work. But we do want to start looking at what is the master system, which one system is going to be the controller for each object. In some cases, that's not possible. In other cases, we looked at, okay, it can't be a master. We need to retain information on who, what, and when for every transaction. What system updated what transaction, at what date, and what time, and who was it? Because then we can actually retain and find out how we could actually merge these things, this data together, because each system had a separate identifier. Salesforce, for those Salesforce people, has an 18-character identifier. Newformer system, this other system that was out there before, has a 4 to 16-character identifier. And their AS400 had a 6-character identifier. So we had to maintain all that information within there. We also probably put in some extra pieces that we could say, hey, we could allow their partners to connect on remotely to do some web services. The biggest pattern that we used was an integration pattern that we formed probably several years ago on a large project, which basically said, we are going to build our design that can run at any time. So we always maintain the last time the integration ran. So if we wanted to turn around and have the data updated within 2 minutes, we just change the schedule. If we want to actually update information from one system to another system, it actually looks up, okay, when did I last run? So we retain this information of the data, the date, in one format, and we convert it for each system that we're actually working with. This allowed the administrators to jump into these schedules and go, you know what, I don't need to change the integration, I just need to change the schedule. So I can change the schedule, I can actually go and say, hey, let's run this every 2 seconds. I could jump into that text file and change the year to 1900 and let it run, and it'll just synchronize all the data from day one. So there's a few million records, it'll go for a few million. But if it's only getting what's changed in the last hour, then obviously that might only be a few hundred or a few thousand records. And obviously that's going to be really quick and efficient. Everything we worked with, because you were looking up several different sources of information, because it wasn't as simple as a simple table or a simple structure. You had multiple structures, multiple tables that were interrelated. So we actually decided that it was too slow to go out to Salesforce and look up another piece of information, to go to a different database and look up some more information. So we actually had a process around, we actually go and grab this lookup data and update it and store it locally into pipe delimited files. And the reason we use these pipes, obviously, is comma delimited is commas are used in currencies and numbers and text and that as well, and no one uses pipe for anything. So this means that the integration, when it ran, it looked up a file that was stored on the server, but it actually, the way the integrations run, it picks up that file and stores it in memory. So all your lookups and everything that you do to update information was really quick and efficient because it could use this information that's all stored in memory. Part of this whole process was the data matching and cleansing. How do you match records that have different systems that are people entered in differently with no rules? There was typing mistakes, spelling mistakes, things like that. Obviously, if you had a government identifier for a company, it'd be easy. But they had none of that in there because they didn't have any business rules to put these identifiers in. So we actually took things like the name. We condensed the name down. We took out any non-characters, so any commas and spaces, and condensed it down. And we found if we took all the companies, if we got to 16 characters, they were all unique. So once we achieved uniqueness, then we could do matching. So in each system, we determined what the magical number of characters, the minimum numbers that were going to be unique for us to be able to do some basic matching. And this achieved our result of getting about 80%, maybe 75%, of the companies matched up. And that worked well. Now we could have actually gone further and used some fuzzy matching. There's plenty of algorithms out there, I didn't list them up there, like Leinstein algorithm, there's a bit tab algorithm that you can do that sort of looks at the characters and how, in a character set, how many character changes would occur for that character set to match this character set. Now, obviously, if you wanted to go ahead and do that, it's going to take a lot more time, but that is possible as well. The key, other than the actual matching side of things, was actually to look at what rules we can set up for the future to make sure we're not revisiting this data cleansing component every time. You know, no contact within so many years, don't care about them, put them in a bucket. No activity with the company for so many years, don't care about them, put them into a bucket. And then all the associated records with that information need to be put into this bucket that we're calling archive data. We still want to have the ability to have it accessible, but we essentially want to make sure that we're not spending time in using that information or presenting that information to the users that are actually using the system. Now, this is not a perfect exercise. This is an exercise which means that you have to determine how long you are doing it for, because you can go on and try and match, and that's why I put a lot of words up here so you can be reading them. You can go along and match and spend time matching this for days, for weeks, for months. Years ago, I've been on cleansing projects which run for 6 months. Then you go away for a couple of years and you get called back again to do the same project 6 months later. So clearly you need to make sure that you're not only sort of cleaning up, but then you start putting business rules in, like when you put a company in, you must be putting in the company identifiers. You must have at least this as the minimum information. this system is the key system for that data. It's going to hold all the business rules. If you try and put it into a different system, obviously it's not going to take it. So where we're looking at for the future is really about providing direct integration into all these key systems. So using the API technology that's inside GeneXus to work with the web services directly with Uniforma. Now, could I say, oh, could I have done without an integration platform to start with? I probably could have, but it would have taken me longer, because I could just set up the integration in the background, and it was in real time or in batch and scheduled mode, updating the various systems as needed. So it made my life easy. However, now that these are all integrated, or in the future when they are, and that we have the ability to directly work with these key systems, then we can do a direct call to that system. Because we know this is the master here. We know this is the master over here. We know from Uniforma they could do a call to our application because we've got some web services enabled on it because we've developed it in GeneXus. So we can actually accept that information and process it immediately in real time. So the future is all about using real-time integration at the time the transaction is occurring. Each of these systems will be offline, online, and mobile enabled. This is where they want to get to in the future. Now, all of this obviously is going to evolve over the next few years with this client. But I couldn't have got through it all, and our company couldn't have got through it all without the help of GeneXus. So the guys at GeneXus, like Gustavo and the team that sort of helped us from support and training, education. Gonzalez was here, so I know you helped me as well. And the team from Develop that also helped with sort of making things look good and getting things right as well. So our project, whilst it's still in its infancy, it is still the beginning. The great thing about coming here today is that I saw what the future can hold for them. I saw that we can actually evolve this solution into something that's going to be a benefit to them. And I know that from a future-proof perspective, they'll be doing really well with using GeneXus. And that's it. Thank you. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to take a few questions.
How much time does it take to process?
The process from when we first started and presented the prototype to where we are now has been going on for months. The actual development work, though, for the initial piece was 1 week. The integration work took 2 days, and the GeneXus build for the company's contacts, opportunities and projects is about a week's worth of development. Where we're going the next stage with the resource forecast and all that has been a lot more complex. And the reporting piece and what they're wanting for a development to be able to update multiple records at the same time on one screen and things like that is going to take it to a new level of complexity. The key thing though was the first idea of this came about when I found GeneXus was to go, if I really want to learn how to use a tool, I want to use a tool on something real, and created this prototype based on something real. And then presenting that to the customer is what really took us to the next level. So the great thing with that company, Wiley, is they signed with us a month ago a new agreement that we're going to be taking over all their development in the future. So what's been a customer of ours for something else is now that they're stuck with us, which is good news for us. Any other questions? Yes?
Why do you want to get rid of the integration platform?
It's another cog in the wheel, you might say. At the moment, we don't have a need in the current where we're going to go to. That could change, because in 2 years' time, when we get to that point, and I'm talking about this point back here, we might find that we still need an integration tool for something, and it's there, so it makes it easy. But what we do want to do is that a person out in the field is doing an update on a form. That update will go straight back into new forma. And that's a key differentiator that we're sort of presenting to them at the moment, is that we want to be able to build projects, and the new forma only just produced an API for them literally last month. So we're only having this capability to do a direct API, not via the integration, in the future. So the idea is that for these systems, they're going to be direct. And maybe there's something, the AS400, I think that's probably going to disappear as they see some more and more benefits from GeneXus. At least I hope so. Not if there's any IBMers in the class. No, that's okay. Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. I believe there's a speaker on after me, Jeff. Jeff's going to be presenting on his experiences over the last few years. Can I say how many? 18? 17? There you go. He had dark hair when he started. So please hang around for Jeff, and he'll be telling you about the road and path he's been on for the last so many years. Excellent. Thank you, guys.